I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 5:32. Item 2, presentations. A, budget study session number 3. We've had 3 people sign up to speak to this topic. At this time, the board will receive comments from those individuals who signed up to speak to the specific agenda item. Speakers will be called up to speak in the order in which they appear on the sign-in sheet and to the item that they signed up to speak to. Speakers should limit their comments to the specific agenda item for which they signed up. Please remember that this is a business meeting of the board. Any person or group engaging in outbursts of any kind causing a disruption of the meeting will be warned, and if they persist, will be removed from the meeting. This is to ensure that all speakers have an opportunity to make comments without interruption, and that the board members are able to pay full attention to speakers without any distractions. Ms. Huey.
Number 1.
Good afternoon. My name is Chelsea Sanchez, and I'm the senior English teacher at the Academy of Creative Education. I've got a lot to say about the budget. For some personal context, my 25-year-old brother, who is currently applying to med school, shares a one-bedroom apartment with me, and as you might have noticed, I cut my own hair. Sometimes it goes better than others. I've been a teacher for 11 years, 5 of which I've spent at ACE. Before NEISD, I spent 1 year in Chelyabinsk, Russia on a Fulbright grant, and then 5 years at a local charter school, which managed to lure parents away from NEISD and at the same time be so terrible that it drove students to attempt suicide in the bathroom and had COVID-level turnover 5 years before the pandemic. Even with broken desks, no band, and no football, their propaganda machine surpassed that of NEISD. The school threatened to sue anyone who posted a bad review and bribed others into giving them high ratings on niche. But a far larger component of their success is the same as that of ACE. It is small. The parents like small because they think it means that bullying and violence won't be a problem. They're wrong. Small size is only part of the solution, but the parents think they don't have another option because they don't feel their needs are being met by enormous NEISD schools. The demand is there for a solution in the district. Last week I heard a lot of reasons why the district feels too financially unstable to provide the raises requested by our unions. However, every single one of the plans shows some level of financial risk and uncertainty 5 years down the road. It offered stopgaps, just enough of a raise to keep people from rushing out the door, but that does not solve the problem. Because of our small student-teacher ratio, I assume ACE is the most expensive program in the district, yet we save taxpayers thousands of dollars a year, and over our 30-year history, $5 billion, according to the treasurer of our AACC, by helping our students earn their diploma and take advantage of help that can lift them out of poverty. Yet when you read testimonials from our students, you learn that often their counselors haven't heard of ACE. Their teachers confuse it with alternative school, or worst of all, they know what it is but offer it up only as a last-ditch effort to keep that kid in school. What you won't find in ACE testimonials are the horror stories students have from their home campuses. They've been cleaned up, but the problem students mention should be read by all of us so they can be addressed, because addressing them is the only way you are going to keep students who struggle in this district. My old charter school fired the admins that had been running the school into the toilet. It's actually functioning rather nicely now. But how do we fix our problems? We all know raises for more experienced teachers will help. Teachers need smaller class numbers. That means, yes, also having pay high enough to attract new teachers. Teachers and admins need training in restorative discipline so that students and adults can see each other as people even at our worst moments. Our schools need stand counselors and family specialists on staff full-time, especially ACE. Why we are the only high school without a stand counselor is beyond me. We need replicated ACE programs for 9th through 10th grade. And a program for middle school students as well, because it makes no sense that we have an alternative middle school to punish and ostracize, and not an ACE middle school to empower and uplift. You are probably thinking that this sounds really expensive, way more expensive.
I'm sorry, that's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 2.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Micah. My name is Teresa Hurd, and I have been a paraprofessional for the past 15 years. I'm speaking tonight regarding the compensation package that is being considered for the upcoming school year. In the years that I have worked for the district, I have heard, seen, and experienced many of the ups and downs that your employees have endured. I'm a single-parent mom of 2 boys, one who just recently graduated. Thank you, Dr. Micah, for giving that diploma to him. And just to make ends meet, I have to work a part-time job just to put food on the table along with the district. I was able to have health insurance until it got too expensive. Last board meeting, you shared many different plans. Your employees deserve more for what they have done pre-COVID and post-COVID for students' success. You've asked us to be flexible with more work and a lot of adjustments. 76% of your employees do not make midpoint, yet a 2 to 3% raise from midpoint is not enough to cover the cost of living. Custodians have been working hard in keeping schools sanitized and clean daily. Many campuses are shorthanded, yet expected to perform the same level of service. NEISD is aware that your custodians have been working without AC during summer. This creates a hostile work environment, yet staff members are expected to endure this environment. Paraprofessionals have numerous daily duties with special needs students. The stress of being physically abused or assaulted, as well as their personal items being stolen or broken, creates an environment where paras are not adequately compensated for their role. Transportation personnel have been dealing with disrespect and violent students' behaviors, and yet are told, you should be lucky that you have a job. Yes, the Big Four are important to your district, but so are your custodians, your paras, your food service, your transportation, and your secretaries. They open and close our campuses every day, and yet how are we rewarded? With pay that is not enough to support a family. These employees are the backbone to NEISD. Please consider these employees first when you vote for our salaries and compensation. Thank you.
Number 3.
Good evening, Board President Mrs. Grona, members of the board, Dr. Micah, members of NEISD, and guests. My name is Christina Bass. I am a school bus driver for NEISD at the North Terminal. One of the things I wanted to bring up in regards to the budget, and this is probably going to be an unpopular statement, but the budget, although is extremely important, it will only repair or help to repair a small portion of what is happening, I believe, in the district. I know that morale is a huge problem. Morale, it can make or break a district or any company, really. Studies have shown that a raise will raise morale for about 3 weeks. So, once you get that first paycheck, you're feeling good, you're great. But if you are going to a job where the morale is very low, it can only help so much. I wanted to just shine a light on the things the budget cannot fix. That being morale. It won't fix to extinguish the burnout of teachers, bus drivers, support staff. Morale, like I said, can make or break a district's ability to achieve its goals. In looking at the budget, we have to look beyond that as well. What are the things that it's not going to fix? Low morale equals many absence, conflicts with coworkers, insubordination, decreased productivity. It's bad enough that, and you can't help to compare things. If I go through a drive-through restaurant and I see that the 15-year-old making a burger is getting paid more than myself, who, has the lives of 60 students, on board, that doesn't do a lot for morale, but if I have a good work environment, if I like the people I'm working for, if I feel like I'm valued, then I'm more willing to stick with that district or that company through hard times. I'm willing to do more for them with less pay. And I know this budget is, difficult, and there's a lot of things to consider. But I would consider, I know 2 weeks ago, not 2 weeks ago, but a few meetings ago, the question was asked, why are, okay, thank you so much.
And that's all.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Villarreal.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Mike, executive staff, and guests. Tonight, we bring you budget study session number 3. We've completed 1 and 2, and tonight we'll be talking about a detailed budget view. Recap from budget study session number 1. Increased property values do not increase overall M&O revenue. 2.5 limitation is an overall M&O tax collections. Homeowners may still see a tax increase greater than 2.5% if their home value increased, despite further compression of the tax rate. ADA has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Several area districts have more access to revenue than any ISD. School nutrition no longer feeding everyone for free, but increasing CEP sites. And recap from budget study session number 2, district contribution rate to health insurance will increase. Compensation plan ranges from 1% to 3% and includes targeted adjustments. We talked a little bit about cost containment, and a reminder, budget is not the same as our forecasted actual results. It will be larger as it includes 100% personnel fill rates and 100% spending. And with that, we start off with the agenda is debt service review, school nutrition services review, general fund review, and then the next steps, adoption on Thursday. So with that, turn it over to Susie Lackhorn, our Executive Director of Finance and Accounting.
Thank you. Good evening, you all. Thank you all for being here tonight. We're going to start out with the debt service fund and look at each of the 3 funds that you adopt in the same manner that you would adopt them, by the same codes and the structure. So tonight, let's start by looking at debt service. Debt service, of course, is the fund where we track and collect property tax payments in order to pay off debt that the voters approved for bonds. We also have debt associated with qualified school construction bonds. In 2010, we issued $37 million worth of these bonds. They are not funded through tax collections. They are funded through our M&O payments, and so we will pay those bonds off in 2027. I will have a quiet celebration in my office that day that they're gone. That payment's in 2027, so we've been saving up money for that debt payment all these years since 2010. And then the rest of the voter-approved bonds that we've had bond elections for throughout the years, those are funded primarily through property tax collection. So our local revenue for the debt service fund is primarily property taxes, a little bit of interest and investment income, but primarily this is property taxes. And so we talked quite a bit about property taxes back in our first budget study session, and we talked about how uncertain this year is. We had large increases, and when we got preliminary values before that first meeting, they told us that they expected larger than normal protests. Well, their words are shattered all records. So they have much more protests this year than they've had in past. And currently, with our most recent update, over 40% or roughly 40% of our net taxable value is still under review. So the number of protests that they received has taken a large percentage of our taxable value and for them to review. And they have to get that settled by far enough by July 25th to give us certified values. So we still don't have a real clear picture of what property taxes are going to look like this year. But right now, as of Friday, they had processed and resolved 46,000 protests, and they have over 128,000 to go. So the appraisal district's working hard and fast to settle and resolve their protests, but until they get further along in the process, we won't have a great feeling for what our property tax collections are going to look like. But right now, this budget has us keeping the tax rate at 30 cents, same as last year, and as you can see, of the total revenue, 66% is coming from our local, the property taxes and our investments. Now, on to state revenue. This number is basically the hold harmless that the state has promised us for when they raise that homestead exemption. So in the past, they had raised it before, and then just in May, we talked about this at budget study session number 1, they raised the homestead exemption from $25,000 to $40,000. When they passed that through the legislature, they included a hold harmless, so the state's going to contribute some money to make up for the fact that our taxable value decreased due to that increase in the homestead exemption. And that's what that state revenue's for. Our federal revenue, when we issued those qualified school construction bonds, the majority of the interest is paid by the federal government. And so those bonds are almost completely interest-free. And so we've just been set aside principal to pay for them. And this federal revenue represents the Fed's contribution to those interest payments. Our other resources are funding for when we remarket our variable rate debt. So in July, we'll go out to the market, remarket our variable rate debt, and when we do that, we have an other use and an other resource that basically offset each other as we remarket that debt. So let's look at expenditures. For 22-23's budget, here's our principal and interest. Other includes fees for payments, and also it has a number in there for us to pay down debt early should we choose to. So as we go and evaluate debt in the market, if we need to go and pay down debt early to save taxpayers money, then in the other section under appropriations, that's what that money is set for. Other uses is the other side of that remarketing. As you can see, those numbers are almost the same as we go and remarket our variable rate debt. Here's how that impacts fund balance. As you can see, fund balance will be very high, but there are some very good reasons for why we need such a high fund balance in our debt service fund. For debt service funds with June 30th year end, the rules state that we must have enough funds available to cover our August 1st debt service payment. This is a prime example of why we were talking about fund balance being important, is that you don't have a lot of income coming in July and early August to make those kinds of payments. So if you're a June 30th district, you have to have enough money in your fund balance to be able to make that August 1st payment. So to take a look at this is if we back off that August 1st payment, paying off principal early, and the set aside for that balloon payment we're going to have to pay for the qualified school construction bonds, the QSCABs, in 2027. As we set aside, that grows, and so you can see our fund balance isn't nearly as big as it looks when you first take a look at it. All right, so now let's get an update on school nutrition services. At budget study session number 1, we looked at them, but we didn't have any compensation numbers included in their expenses. So now we've gone through and we've added compensation. And as you can see, the vast majority of their spending is in our functional category for food services, with a little bit in facilities and security. We'll talk more about these functional categories when we get to the general fund. Since school nutrition only has 3, you don't get quite a feel for what they're like, but the general fund has a lot of them, so we'll talk in more detail about what function codes are. When we combine their new expenditure estimate with their revenue, they'd have a loss of $2.3 million, but if you remember, we talked before, once they get over 3 months, we have to start spending that down. So we actually need them to lose money so that we can get back into compliance. An adjustment from our previous presentation on meal prices. We've added a pricing, these numbers are the same except for we've added a line for preschool. They get smaller portions than your regular elementary students, and so a slightly reduced price for them to reflect the fact that they're getting smaller portions. All right, on to the general fund. So TEA requires us to track all of our transactions with a 20-digit account code. This 20-digit account code allows you to view our data in multiple ways. And so one of the ways is by object level. And this is a summary of object codes for TEA on this slide. And we'll be able to take a look in many different ways here in a minute, but let's start by looking at the changes from last year's budget to this year's budget. Well, the first thing that jumps right off the page is the same thing I've said repeatedly this session, is that $20 million worth of our teacher salaries are sitting over in ESSER for next year. And so in 23-24, we'll be talking about them coming back in. So, but for next year, salaries and benefits, even though we have a compensation package and other changes, ultimately it will decrease compared to last year's budget because of all those salaries sitting over in ESSER. Last year, when we adopted the budget, we had not enough information about ESSER to be able to make the determinations of how they were going to do this. We actually didn't even know that ESSER 2 was going to be made available to us at that time. There was a possibility that the state could have taken the whole thing, so we didn't know what was going to happen. So let's take a look at contracted services. This is your next largest number. Bear in mind that built into contracted services, that's TEA's name for it, but it includes a lot of things that you may not naturally think is contracted services. So the biggest piece of this, 35%, is utilities. So utilities are included in contracted services. And the next largest piece is 34%. Those are charges from within the district's own internal service funds. Those are funds set up for district departments. And instead of their staff and their operations living in the general fund, they have their own internal service fund, and then they charge the general fund for their services. This is how our police department works. And so the police department has its own fund where their salaries live and their costs live, and then they charge the general fund for those costs. So you'll see, we'll talk a little bit more about the police department when we get to some of the function code stuff, but 34% of this $47 million is actually charges for stuff we do internally here in the district. So we're not paying somebody else. We're basically paying ourselves for the services of departments. The other large departments that operate like this are technology. And so it allows us to allocate the costs to the campuses and track them. And it also allows them to record their costs in their own fund and track their costs separately. All right, so supplies and materials. Over 26% of this is for maintenance supplies. So included in there will be light bulbs or pipe or screws, those kinds of things. It's not just instructional supplies, but a good percentage of it is there. Fuel's also here. So there's another big component of this category is fuel. Other operating costs, just a lovely generic name for anything else that doesn't fall into one of the other categories. This would include 37% of this number is for our insurance. And we talked about earlier in the year how insurance is going up, and a large piece of this is for insurance. Another 18% is for student and employee travel, so that category falls under other operating too. Capital outlay, small piece of the budget. And other uses is really the bulk of that is the set aside for that QSCAB, that Qualified School Construction Bond Payment. So where we're sending a portion of that every year over into the debt service so that when 2027 gets here and we have to pay it off, all the money's there waiting and we just cut the check and we're done with that debt. All right, so when you adopt the budget, TEA mandates that we adopt by function code. And this is a summary, a grouping of all the function codes. TEA defines function codes as general operational area. And that doesn't necessarily help you understand what a function code means. So on the future slides, we give you an idea of what each function code includes. It's not all inclusive, but it gives you a basic idea. In the past, the state used to like us to spend at least 65% of our budget, and they would monitor us for spending it on instruction and instruction related. And this is because those are the things that most directly impact the student, because that is spending in the classroom. So we're always pleased to see when our budget has at least 65% spent in instruction and instruction related, even though we're no longer tied to that requirement for the state anymore. It's still good to see that the bulk of our dollars are going into the classroom. And as you can see, our percentages really don't change a whole lot from year to year. The dip in instruction and instruction related is because over $20 million worth of teachers are sitting over in ESSER for next year. And so that's that dip right there. But the rest of the percentages stay pretty consistent year to year. So here we are by each individual function. So the previous slide grouped functions together, but this slide has each individual function broken out. So function 11, that's where all your direct classroom costs are coded. So if it's supplies for the classroom, if it's a teacher salary, instructional assistant salary, subs for a teacher, those kinds of costs are coded to function 11. And as you can see, we have a large decrease, again, that's related primarily to ESSER. For function 12, it has this lovely title called Instructional Resources and Media Services, but really and truly, it's the library and our library, any cost associated with it. Curriculum development and instructional staff development. This is where any cost associated with developing curriculum or professional development. And as you can see here, there seems to be a pretty sizable decrease. Part of this is because in the prior year, in 21-22, we planned to do extra training because HB3 required us to do reading academies. There was a new requirement passed in 2019. And you had a certain time frame in which you had to have those reading academies accomplished. Well, COVID hit. Well, most districts, just like us, had trouble training teachers whenever COVID was around, and you couldn't gather in large groups anymore. And so last year's budget included extra training for reading academies to try to catch us up so that we can meet those time frames. Also, just bear in mind that when we give campuses their discretionary budget, we give it to them in April, and then they're making decisions of where they think they're going to spend the money. But they can choose to change that at any point in time, but this is just an estimate. So one year they may say, I want to put most of my cost in this function, or, I think next year we're going to do a lot of this. And so they'll plan for it there and then move it throughout the year as they see fit. So some of these changes are just changes in campuses or departments as they go through and plan year to year. We even will see every now and then some campuses or departments will I'm not sure what I'm doing yet, so I'm doing just basic placeholders, and I'll distribute my funds as I get a better plan, because a lot of people are doing planning right now. And so it's kind of hard as you're gearing up for STAR test to do a whole lot of planning on where you're going to be spending your dollars next year. Sometimes you have to get through STAR test and go, oh, now that I have my results, now I know what things I'm going to target next year. But we can't always wait for them to have all that to build our budget. Next we have the twos, function 21 and function 23, instructional leadership. So this will include things like your special ed campus coordinator and central office departments that oversee those instructional groups like GT, bilingual. Not a big change from year to year here. School leadership will be all those campus administration-like positions. Function 31 is guidance, counseling, and evaluation services. It includes our counselors, our CCMR specialists, all sorts of different staff. It also includes fees, so this isn't all salaries, as none of these are, but this will include where we pay for advanced placement tests, and a lot of tests and those kinds of things are paid for out of Function 31. Function 32 includes our family specialists, attendance officers. Those are the staff that go and try to, when we have students who aren't coming to school, trying to make those contacts and get them to come back to campus. The big change here in health services, this is, once again, not anything related. It's not like we cut health services budget or nurses or anything like that. It's, part of it is just planning for vacancies, and also in 21-22, as you're building your budget and you're in the middle of a pandemic, you think, I probably need a lot of money to buy masks and hand sanitizers and those kinds of things. And then then this year, after a quieter year with the pandemic, then staff doesn't feel quite as necessary to put as much money in Function 33 now that they've seen what they've spent in a full school year. Function 34 is school transportation. 35 is food services. Now, school nutrition obviously has its own fund, and it's outside. This is just a tiny little bit of stuff that the state and the feds won't let us charge to the school nutrition fund. There are just a few little things that they're like, the general fund must pay for it. So we budget a few $1,000s in the general fund for those things. Extracurricular activities, Function 36. Again, some of this is because when we're budgeting for vacancies, a coach is primarily a teacher. And so I've budgeted the bulk of their cost over in Function 11, even though a part of their salary will go to Function 36 because of their coaching stipend. And again, different campuses will choose to budget in different ways in different function codes, but this isn't necessarily reflective of a straight cut or anything. Function 41. It's everybody's favorite function, because when you don't know where it goes, or if you can't find where it fits, then 41 is the winner. So it's a catch-all, and if you can't find a place to go, then you're going to have to put it in administration. So it includes me. It includes all sorts of fees. It includes a portion of what we pay Bear County and the tax collector, and just those general administration departments and all the costs associated with them. All right, speaking of Function 41, we talked about the administrative cost ratio in the past. And Schools First, which is that financial integrity rating system of Texas, which each year the state rates how well districts are doing financially. It calculates this cost ratio, and it takes your functions 21 and 41, and you divide it by 11, 12, 13, and 31. And I have their descriptions there, and each of those can be found on the previous pages. For a district our size, you get 10 points if your administrative cost ratio is below 8.55%. And you still get 2 points even if you're all the way up to 18.55%. Well, we've always managed to be one of the lowest ones in the area. And you can do this either by all funds or by just the general fund. If you do it the other way, then we flip to being next to last. But we are almost always in these bottom two positions and have a low administrative cost ratio. And that trend's been here since I've been here. With our size, we get a lot of efficiencies. And compared to some districts, we don't have quite as many departments as what I've seen in neighboring districts. I think I've mentioned that a little bit last time when we were talking about cuts. All right. After Function 41, we move into the fives. This is student support services, where we have Function 51 has facility maintenance, so your custodians, all plumbers, electricians, warehousing, utilities. A lot of property insurance is in this function too, in all of utilities. And so, again, similar size to what it was compared to our budget the previous year. Security and monitoring services, that's basically, for the most part, it's the police department. There are a handful of other things that will have to go in there. TEA has a nice long list of everything that must go into each function code, and so there are a few things associated with monitoring, like radios and some communication things that go in Function 52, but as you can see, not a big change here. Data processing, this is all your technology stuff. It's network services, technology services, and MIS, or Management Information Services. So, and again, both 52 and 53, the majority of those costs are in an internal service fund, and we charge the district back for their services. All right, so we're getting down to some of the smaller functions now, community services. If we have any construction or significant renovations in the general fund, most of that stuff is done through our capital projects funds that are funded by the bonds. But those would be in Function 81. 93 is the share that we have for our regional day school program for the deaf. We share the program with Judson, Comal, and Alamo Heights, and so this is our share of that shared program. Our payments to Bexar County JJAEP is Function 95, and in Function 99 is most of the payments to the Bexar Appraisal District. Some of it goes to Function 41, that is just TEA being very particular about what type of cost goes where. So, all right, so that's all your function codes. They're very exciting. I'm glad you stayed awake through it. Let's look at how we spent, or rather where. So we looked at what, and those function codes are kind of why. So this is really where. So of our $560 million budget, nearly 82% of it are things that are directly related to those campuses. And so only 18.5 would be for our non-campus. And so non-campus are things that, though obviously everything we do is related to our schools, but not everything can be allocated back. So like the finance department can't really be allocated back to the campuses. We have some special education staff like speech paths who spend a lot of time at a lot of different campuses. So you can't just allocate them directly back to a particular campus. Transportation, they'll serve multiple campuses with their department, obviously all the campuses with their department. Same thing with maintenance and athletics. So those are just examples. And so the non-campus cost includes things like that we can't directly tie back. So when we look at the costs charged back to, directly allocated to our campuses, over 90% is for salaries and benefits. So of the $457 million, 332 is for salaries and 80 is for benefits. So you can see very labor intensive here. The next largest things are services, and the bulk of that will be billings from the police department and the technology department, and then utilities. And that's a sizable piece of what gets charged back to the campuses in the budget. And when you break down their salary budget, you can see by far the biggest group are teachers and aides, which is what we want to see, as those things are directly in our classrooms and directly impacting our students. Now let's take a look at non-campus. So not nearly as much of it is salaries and benefits, as because you'll see we'll be paying for other things, contracts and things like that. Services also include like contracted maintenance would be in services. So anything that we can't fix or repair ourselves and we ship out, that'll be included in services here. And you can see at the bottom our split between professionals, about 50, and hourly, 51 and 49% there. So let's take a look at the non-campus budgets by department. So we don't list every department because we'd run out of room on the slides, but we start at the top and work our way down. And as you can see, over 30% of the non-campus budget is spent on two departments, transportation and maintenance. And bear in mind that for all these departments, this isn't all just salaries and benefits. This includes their operational costs. So for example, the risk management department, included in there is the payments for our insurance. So that includes their operating costs. So this isn't all salaries and benefits. This is everything associated with their department. And you can see our tax appraisal and collection total budget of $3.1 million. That's the money that we can't control, that Bexar County charges us for their services. And as you go through here and look at the different departments, bear in mind, like when you get to executive staff, that is not salaries. Included in there are several things that we have just chosen to have the executive staff budgets pay for. So Mr. Jimenez's budget pays for a significant amount of student travel. This way, he gets to monitor travel and what's happening there, and the campuses aren't completely burdened with it. So now, granted, they pay for a lot of travel, but there's certain travel that comes straight out of Mr. Jimenez's budget, and it lets him monitor it. Dr. Mitchell's budget pays for our Social Sentinel social media monitoring service. And so there's a lot of things embedded in that executive staff number. I just didn't want anybody to think that that was just straight salaries. Included in our other will be that money that we've been sending over to debt service for the QSCAB payment for that future pay down of that debt. It also includes things like legal bills and any other departments that were too small to make the list here. All right, so here are our forecast and our proposed budgets that you've seen over the last few weeks. Our proposed budget is the negative deficit of $17 million, but with forecasted results of an increase of $3 million. And our next steps. So, Thursday is our public hearing. We advertised this in the paper that it would happen on Thursday. That went in the Express News on the 11th. So Thursday night, we'll ask you to adopt the 22-23 budget. We'll ask you to approve the final budget for the current year. And you'll have some fund balance of commitments. This is just an administrative thing. We'll talk more about it on Thursday. And then we won't be able, just remember, we won't be able to adopt the tax rate until August or September, more than likely September. The date depends on TEA, so they have to certify a couple of things. First, we have to get certified values in late July from the appraisal district. Then TEA will take that and calculate what our minimum tax rate for, our maximum tax rate for our general fund can be. And then they also have to certify that we've filled out a couple of forms before we can adopt a tax rate. And with that, do you have any questions?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm reading this correctly, but you guys keep saying that there's going to be a drop in fuel charges and things like this for your buses? Because you kept doing a negative?
No, overall, that's the total budget. So we had extensive amounts of overtime this past year as we were short-staffed. So our expectation is when we look at the price forecast on the EIA's website, they're forecasting a drop in prices from now later out in the year. But we're still expecting our fuel prices, our fuel cost overall to be slightly more than the current year. But we also expect other costs in the transportation department to go down, such as overtime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we expect those savings to offset some of the other increases.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay.
I have some.
Okay.
Did you want to go first? I just have a few questions here. Excuse me. I think, what is this? Well, I don't remember which slide. I didn't write it down. But if you can, you mentioned there's the fund balance is needed to cover August payments, and I guess maybe possibly September.
So we
about
made
how much do you project or think those August payments would be?
about $60 million. So our debt payments are made August 1st and February 1st. So we only make payments twice a year. And so the projected payments for August is about $60 million. So that includes both the principal payment and the interest associated with it. So that's why we need that very large fund balance and debt service so that we have the money ready and available to make the August 1st payment.
That 3.8%. I'm sorry, that 3.8 months.
That's for the
fund.
general fund. The debt payment for it's in debt service that we need the $60 million for the debt payment. Now, in the general fund, we are using it to set aside about $2 million a year for the one lone piece of debt that isn't paid for by taxpayers. So that debt is funded by the general fund. And since 2010, we've been putting about $2 million aside each year so that in 2027 we'll have enough money. So that's, each year we take $2 million from the general fund and send it over to debt service. And then in 2027, we'll just write a check and pay off that debt.
Okay, I guess my question that I was trying to get to is it possible to reduce our fund balance by an amount to help increase salaries a little more than the 3% and still be within an acceptable
You can't
fund-
use, you can't use the fund balance and debt service
But-
to do that.
Okay, but not in debt service, but
No.
in general fund.
Correct. You can use your general fund, and if you remember last week, we went through and showed you how the different salary plans, the compensation plans would impact the general fund's fund balance.
Okay, I'm just trying to, think this out because we do have, so, what you've said is that the budget is 100% is accounting for, excuse me, 100% salary expenditure, 100% expenditures, in all categories. Now, we don't spend that 100%, then that amounts to the, help us with the fund balance. That doesn't roll over, but it helps to cover those August expenses, or whatever we need to cover until the money's come in.
Correct. So last week, when we were showing you the impact of those different compensation plans, we weren't, one of the slides, the first set of slides we showed you were actually not the budget. It was what the actual impact to our forecasted actuals, how we expect the year to truly finish and not spending everything. And so we were showing you a $22 million loss in which is about half a month's fund balance in 23-24. And that's actual, that's not having, that includes all the savings from not spending all the budget.
But we still have a fund, but so in the year that we currently are in, we still anticipate, of course, having a fund balance at the end of this fiscal.
Correct. So at the end of 21-22, if you look at this slide right here, we're forecasting to have about 3.7 months. And then at the end of 22-23, we forecast to be about 3.8. But in 23-24, we'll have that $22 million loss, and fund balance starts getting eaten away by half a month at that point in time each year, unless we do something or change something.
So, Ms. Williams, in 24-25, like Susie was saying, there's another $20 million that's going to be a $20 million actual loss. So if you remember when we proposed 3-2-1. So when we went out 3 years, in 3 years, not doing any raises next year or contributing to health insurance, we would be at 2.2 months in 3 years from now. So I think the 3.8, it looks like quite a bit, but when you go further out, when you start forecasting actuals in 23, 24, 24, 25, I think we would be dropping down to the twos as far as fund balance.
So, so on this slide right here, forecasted fund balance, months of operation is 3.7, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's how we'll end up the year.
Right.
This year,
Right, this
21,
year.
22.
This year. So there's nothing that we could say, something's unspent that we can utilize to help with salaries for our proposed next year.
We already accounted
Yeah.
for that in all the numbers that we've shown you, so.
Okay, yet our fund balance still would remain at 3.7 because we've already accounted for everything that we could take off of that to spend for salaries.
Right. And
Yes,
so-
ma'am. That would be our forecast. That's what we're thinking we're going to be with not being at 100% of fill rates and things of that type. The 3.7 is what we would be at.
Because remember, in that 22-23 year, the reason that we're still showing you that is ESSER is still around. ESSER leaves in 23-24, and that's when things start going down quick.
Okay, I'm still trying to process some of that. My other question is, you mentioned contracted services includes utilities. I think that was on slide 15 or so. It's not numbered, I just counted the slides. And then 34%, I think you said 34% are internal costs, like technology and,
Correct.
other things. But later on, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I was hearing, trying to keep up. Insurance, things like insurance, is included in operating costs. So that would not be included in contracted services or?
Correct. Insurance is in other operating, not in contracted services. When you're on this slide, okay. When you're on this slide, utilities and our charges from the police department and our technology departments are all in contracted services. And under other operating is where you'll find the insurance. Now, remember, TEA gives us multiple codes to use for different reasons. So they're in separate categories here on this slide. But when you get down to this slide where we're doing the costs by function code, then they're both in, most of them are both in this category in function 51 right here. So it depends on which way you're chopping up the budget about where they fall. So on one way of chopping up the budget, they're in two different categories. But in this method of chopping up the budget, the bulk of both of them are in the same category. Does that make sense? Maybe not.
I'll say yeah. Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
just
it's
say
just a little-
TEA has a lot of rules about what goes where and different ways to look at the same set of numbers.
But insurance, it is something that we do utilize an outside company for, right?
Yes.
And I guess the same goes for tax appraisal and collection. It's not in contracted services, although we really don't have a choice like utilities, but it's an operating cost.
So
Is that a TEA thing as well?
appraisal, the fees we pay to the appraisal district are in the contracted services number on that slide, but they're broken out by themselves in the function code. So when you look at it here, the appraisal district is in contracted services. Some of it, not all of it, because TEA is never that straightforward. And then when you're here, they have the bulk of it is all by itself in 99 when you're doing it by function code.
Susie,
I
would
know.
this be a fair assessment to say, and correct me if you do not agree? Go back to your first slide. I bought groceries. Right?
Yep.
Salaries and benefits, say those are fruits. Right? And then when you get into the function codes, we're now saying bananas, oranges, apples. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's when she says about different ways to look at it. It's like, here's a big category, and then underneath that you can get down into finer details. What goes where? not necessarily up to us. That's TEA saying that's where it belongs. Because I think what you're saying is that doesn't make sense where it is.
It never
Correct.
is.
Sometimes it doesn't, but that's where they tell us this is where it belongs, is under this function code or under this category.
And sometimes the nerdy accountants in the building will spend quite a bit of time debating whether or not a certain transaction should go here versus there. And we'll spend more time than is necessary trying to find the right place for what we think TEA thinks to get it in and coded. But as Dr. Mike is saying, that's a great analogy. Think of it as your grocery bill. And this method is I spent a third of my grocery bill buying breakfast and a third on lunch and 5% on snacks and the rest for dinner. And then the other way to look at it is I bought meat, produce, those kinds of things. So you're taking the same bill and just looking at it in different ways. And so sometimes when you're buying your meat, you may be buying bacon and it's a breakfast food. So it'll fit in different categories depending on how you look at the numbers.
So it's just sometimes it gets a little confusing during our regular
Absolutely.
board meetings when we're looking at purchases and procurements
Sure.
and things like that. And it's like, okay, so was this a contract or was this under this or was this under that? So, okay.
And contracted services is, just a terrible name when you consider, you don't think of your utility bill as a contracted services. Yes, you're paying somebody else for that service, but it's not like you could go out there and do a whole lot of shopping in San Antonio for your utility provider. So, you're pretty much paying who you can pay for that. And then again, in this same category, the district itself is somebody we're paying for services from the police department. And so it's the way they name it, and it's not as clear, which is why I took a little time trying to explain that it's not just a straight, we're cutting checks to all these different vendors for different services.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I know it's a lot. The breaking down in categories is very helpful. Just to clarify for everybody here, we're talking about the 3-2-1 plan, which was initially presented because last meeting we went through a variety of other options that the trustees had asked for. So that's kind of, this is what these.
That's what's reflected in these numbers.
Okay,
Correct.
that's just for everybody that's listening and paying attention. We also had the discussion that we will look in the fall and can continue a possible budget amendment based on enrollment and some of those things, and we can continue to align to the district scorecard, wants versus needs, and we may find some savings.
Correct. That's going to
to
be in compensation, Mr. Hilliard.
Okay, so
this is simply a budget piece.
Okay, so that's-
Because we have to, by law, show you all of this in
Okay.
order for you to adopt a budget. When we go into compensation, Ms. Witten will explain
Okay.
that exact piece in the action item. That is correct.
Okay, so can I say it for the action item then? Because I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
that
sir.
need to be
It
action
is
item.
going to be right in that. That
Okay.
is, you're not voting on this tonight.
Sure.
But to your point, should you all adopt something outside of a 3-2-1, then all of these numbers are going to look different come
That-
Thursday.
Because I just was going to reference the last briefing, but we can wait till the action item. Just the difference in numbers, make sure I had the math right.
Yep.
Okay, we'll save that for the conversation then to the next.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does, because I just have a couple of questions. I want to make sure that if we choose something different, we know what the actual number difference is.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
We're prepared for all of that.
great. Thank you. That's it, Madam President.
Any other questions on budget?
I just had a couple. The ESSER dollars, is it 22 million?
It's I keep saying 20, but it's
Well,
a little over.
Yeah, say one, it kind of looks like 16, and another one is 22,
Well,
another one is 20. So
That's
we-
16. We also have the raise, which offsets part of that. So we have where the bulk of the raise will sit in that function 11. So we have those additional costs that will offset it. So it's never going to be a perfect number in those categories because it's all over. So,
Okay.
but yes,
So using that $20 million figure is roughly
yes, it's,
the one, as good as we can?
yep.
Okay. One thing I wanted to, I guess, Mr. Villarreal or Ms. Lackhorn, if you want to explain. I know we talked a little bit about the first rating, going to the debt service, and we're talking about some of those things. Can you just reiterate what that means? I know we have a couple of new colleagues on the board and what the, I guess, implications are of not getting those scores and those ratings that we try to achieve every year when that comes before us.
Sure. So it's the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. And it's basically, TEA gives us accountability ratings for our campuses and how they perform, basically on the STAR and other measures. There's a ton of points there in the accountability ratings. First has a lot fewer points, but it's basically TEA doing a checklist of saying, yes, financially you're stable, you're managing your funds correctly. And so a superior rating helps our community know that we're making the right decisions and that we are being responsible with taxpayer funds. There are a lot of different measures. Some of them actually penalize us for saving the taxpayer money over the years, and that is really just TEA not keeping up with changes in how we structure debt and things. So you may hear some things in the future where we're like, well, we didn't get enough points in this category, but bear in mind that FIRST is a system meant to apply across the state. And they rate every single district, and you definitely want a superior, meaning that you receive 90 points or above. And it's a measure for how the district sits. And each year we actually have a whole meeting, not a whole meeting, sorry.
Presentation.
We have a presentation in a meeting that will walk you through our scores, but those are not done necessarily on the budget. So the bulk of your first rating is actually on your actual performance.
Right.
And so once we get actuals for the year that's just wrapping up, then we'll be able to bring to you those ratings. But TEA actually takes a while. There's quite a bit of lag. So in the fall, we'll be able to bring you last year's.
Mr. Byer, one of the things that they do look at is if your months go below 2.5, you can't get a superior. You're already docked
right.
into below a 90. So anything under 2.5 months of operating, they'll ding you with that. So there's no possible way to have a superior rating, and then you just work down from there. So.
And if you fail FIRST multiple times, then TEA is going to establish at a minimum a monitor. Sometimes they bring in someone to help guide the board. Worst case scenario is they bring in a manager to oversee, and the school board no longer makes decisions if you've failed FIRST multiple years.
And another thing that our rating agencies also look at whenever we go to remarket or refund some bonds, they look at that. So they look at your financial stability, and they'll question. And one of the things that keeps coming up that we get asked about is our declining enrollment, because they see that. So, but yeah, they look at your total finances, and there's 30, 40 questions they send us, and we have to answer them, and it has to do a lot with our financial stability and where we're going and where we're headed. Because they're looking out in the future also, because that's what they're telling potential bond buyers, that you're stable. And so if you're showing a little decreases, then your cost of borrowing is going to shoot up. And that's one of the things we've been able to do is get some pretty good rates in the last 10 years because of our finances. So.
Okay. Well, and I know that we had that one slide that showed the ratio of our administrative to the other, and I just wanted to make sure that was clear that, I mean, there are implications of getting fund balance too low and having our rating slip and those kinds of things. So
Correct.
a lot of factors that get.
Yes, sir. And you know, I think as a district, we're really proud of the fact that our administrative cost ratio is so low compared to a lot of our peers. We're the lowest. So, and it's been like that for a number of years. So they also look at that, because they also look at what monies are going where. And like Susie was saying, you know, it should be in the classroom. So that it kind of helps us.
And I had one last question. It had to do with the school nutrition. There was one line item that had security and monitoring, and it was $1,000. And it was a figure that, when we're talking about $500,000 here and
Yep.
$24 million there, that
So
one
it's
was very
just-
striking to me.
Yes, it's tiny, right? Again, that's TEA requiring us to charge certain services to certain places. So that's budget is set aside in case the school nutrition department needs services from the police department. So if they use the police department for any of their events or anything like that, then the police department would charge them, and per TEA's rules, it would go to Function 52. And so they just have
Okay.
a small placeholder there in case they need those
Sure.
services.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Anybody else?
I had a thought. So, again, for clarity and for my clarity again, thank you for bearing with me. But I understand, and I, know last week's session, had the nice, pretty, colorful charts with all the different scenarios. So just for clarity, when we have a fund balance, say we have, okay, this year our fund balance is 3.7. Next year we're on the 3-2-1 plan. Next year we're projecting forecasting, I should say, 3.8. That 3.7 fund balance. Let me back up. We don't do zero-based budgeting. Is that correct? Our 3.7 months of fund balance is used to support the incoming budget? No?
Yes. So your ending fund balance from one year becomes your beginning fund balance for the next.
Okay.
So it just rolls with you as you go. And each year, whether you have a surplus or a deficit, moves it up or down, and then it continues with you year to year. And so it's the accumulation of all those surpluses and deficits that really make up that fund balance. And so we're forecasting to end, if you look at this slide right here, we're forecasting to end 21-22 with a $163 million fund balance. So we're forecasting to start 22-23 with a $163 million fund balance. So it rolls with us, and as those losses or income, the surpluses come in, then it'll change it each year from year to year, but it'll keep rolling. And that's why that concern is when we get to a point where that $20+ million comes back from ESSER, then we'll see fund balance getting eaten up much faster. And so, because 22-23 has a forecast of just 3.4 million being added to fund balance. But when you bring those $20 million worth of salaries back in and you start eating in, then you'll you'll eat that $163 million up in just a few years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have questions? I do. Can we jump back to the school nutrition one real fast? The fund balance, I know we're supposed to be at 3 and we're at 4.6. Is there a plan to?
So they'll design a plan as they need to.
Okay.
So we'll see how this year finishes and how this impacts them for next year, but they'll be able to work with TDA as they need to. So I didn't want you to be scared that we were losing money, because we need to bring
Right.
it down.
Okay.
But at the same time, they'll be able to formulate their plan, and TDA approves everything. They check all their boxes. That's the Texas Department of Agriculture, sorry. TEA, the Texas Education Agency, oversees the majority of programs we have, but the school nutrition program is actually overseen by the U.S. Department of Agriculture instead of the U.S. Department of Education. So when it comes down to Texas and they're overseeing it, it's the Texas Department of Agriculture. And so they review our plans and all those things. And so.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on this? No. Were you turning your mic on? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Lackhorn. Item 3, new business for possible board action. A, Campus Administration 1, possible action regarding proposed compensation plan for 2022-2023. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona, and members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. I'd like to invite Shiloh Whitten, she's already up there, Ms. Whitten, Executive Director for Human Resources, to address this agenda item.
Good evening. Tonight we bring to you our proposal for our compensation plan for the 22-23 school year. As Ms. Lackhorn and Mr. Villarreal indicated, our proposal includes what's been presented tonight as the 3-2-1 compensation plan. However, I want to go over some of those key points to elaborate in further detail. So for classified hour employees, we are proposing a minimum 3% general pay increase based on the midpoint of the new 22-23 pay scales, with additional adjustments for bus assistants, bus drivers, custodians, food service assistants, special education assistants, and instructional assistants, so that we can better align with the current market and avoid compression. I want to take a moment just to remind y'all that we presented to you some rates that we have to increase the entry for those positions, which also means changing the ranges themselves. That will result in, for some of these employee groups, a greater percentage than the 3% minimum. It could be between 5 and 10% that some of these employee categories will actually receive based on those changes. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Additionally, after the last presentation, one additional change that Ms. Lackhorn has included into her numbers was we had originally proposed the entry for our bus drivers as $15.53. After further review, we actually are proposing $16 as their entry rate, and we've adjusted the scales and the pay increase to reflect those changes. So that might be some of the numbers that are differing tonight. For teachers and librarians, we are proposing a starting pay of $55,300. And providing eligible teachers and librarians a 2% of midpoint increase, which would equal $1,150. The max new to district rate for teachers and librarians with 25 years or more, we're proposing would be $64,000. In accordance with House Bill 3, this includes differentiated pay for classroom teachers with greater than 5 years of experience. And we kind of previously talked about that in the presentations in the prior weeks. For eligible counselors and nurses, we request granting a 2% general pay increase based on the midpoint of their 22-23 pay scales. And for all other administrative professional employees, request that we grant a 1% general pay increase based on the midpoint of the 22-23 pay scales. And those scales have all been adjusted and are reflected in the compensation plan that we've presented to you this evening. Additionally, as part of this compensation plan, we would like to allow the board to determine that prospective pay increases for employees can be considered in the event that the district's total student enrollment exceeds the projected number of 58,556, and or the average student attendance rate is above 93.5% as of October 28th, 2022. In the event that one or more of these triggering events occurs, the district administration will provide to you information at a duly called meeting, along with a proposal for any prospective pay increases, whether in the form of a salary increase or additional retention supplement payments beyond those that we are presenting this evening. This evening, we are presenting a request to approve a retention plan. We have reviewed available funds through ESSER and determined that we would have funds available to provide a one-time retention supplement for the first semester of the 22-23 school year. In order to qualify, employees would have to have a hired date on or before October 1st. If implemented, the qualified employees would receive a 1% of their annualized pay grade midpoint supplement in accordance with the terms outlined in the resolution we present this evening. The supplement would be paid in November of 2022, and the supplement would be a minimum of $250 for our employees. We also ask that we consider KIN assistants eligible for this retention supplement. They have been eligible in the last two that we presented to you for the 21-22 school year, and we'd like to continue to deem them eligible. Additionally, if we find that ESSER funds are available, we'd like to be able to consider coming back to you and allowing the superintendent to present to you a recommendation for possibly another retention supplement in the spring of 23, again, if funds are available. We also would like to present to you consideration for any sign-on bonuses that if ESSER funds are reviewed and are available, that we consider for high-need areas for teachers as we evaluate where we are with current vacancies in those critical shortage areas where we might have difficulty finding teachers for the upcoming school year. And then lastly, we have the teacher incentive allotment plan that although we do not have presently a designation plan in place for the current school year, if we should hire anyone who comes to us with a designation or a teacher that earns a national board certification, we would receive funds, and we have to adopt a plan that would allow for us to designate at least 90% of those funds to the teacher that is deemed eligible, and then the remaining 10% can be used for costs as permitted by the Texas Education Agency. So in summary, tonight, our compensation plan that we present serves to provide eligible employees with a salary increase, to provide a one-time retention supplement in November, to evaluate the use of ESSER funds to establish a signing bonus for high-need or hard-to-find areas, and to utilize possible teacher incentive allotment funds received for the 22-23 school year. It also serves to permit possible additional compensation for employees in the event certain enrollment and attendance rate metrics are met. Before you take any further action this evening, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
In our package, after that, on page 6, we had a couple different categories of like admin pay grades, exempt salary, police, technology support, and then administrative. But looking at the scales, those numbers, the first page on page 6 of our package, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I'm going to hold up to believe that you're referring to these. Yes, sir.
Is that like an hourly rate for like the A1, the minimum? Is that, or that number seems large? I'm just trying to make sure I understand what that number is.
Thank you. That number for those that are on the professional administration are daily rates.
Okay, that's
Yes,
a daily.
sir.
I just wanted to make sure because I was just trying to understand what the scale was. Because I was going, okay.
Good
So that's a
question.
daily rate, assuming they are.
Correct.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And due
You
to
were
work
rethinking
schedules.
your career choice?
Yeah, it absolutely
Yeah.
was. There was. I'm not sure I qualify for any of those, but those were quite. I was making sure that I understood what the number was. So thank you. That answers that question.
Yes, sir.
With that particular.
And it's reflected that way because we have different work schedules that incumbents in those positions hold.
Understood. Okay. I just want to make sure because there was a difference between the different charts.
Thank you.
Mr. Hilliard, did we answer your question about the targeted component from earlier?
Well, no, actually, what I was going to, I don't know if we need to get discussion going first. I was going to look at the chart from the last meeting showing all the different things, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but I don't know if we need to get a motion first to have a discussion about it, or if we.
Well,
could
is
do-
it, I mean, we can ask
We can-
questions.
Yeah.
We
Well, I just want to
We
make sure
can
I.
display it for you.
Yeah, no, I want to make sure I understood from the budget session last time. It was about halfway through. It was the chart that showed the cost of the different plans, 321, 332, and I want to make sure just I had the right numbers in my head before we have a discussion about them. It's this one right here. This is Lockhorn, in case you're wondering what I'm. I figured you probably knew it.
Page 15.
Page 14 from the last one.
14.
At least on my chart, maybe.
14 and 15.
Do I have the right one up?
Yes, ma'am, that's it. So we're talking about the 2.5 month fund balance. And then there's, obviously, this is if we kept doing the same, whatever, it's a 321 or 332. This is not just this one-time snapshot, or no?
This particular slide that I have on your screen right now is the raise in 22, 23, and then nothing going forward.
Okay, so that is, so it is a one-time, just this next
Correct.
coming year, okay. So,
Not that we would take it away, just that there wouldn't be additional raises, just as a
Okay.
clarification.
and so I just, because from my math, the 321 plan, which is a couple slides prior, is approximately $8.6 million addition. Then the 332 is an additional 9.3 million cost if we implemented that plan. I'm just trying to understand, to make sure I understand the math differential if I'm doing my.
So if you go down the column for 22, 23,
Mm-hmm.
that will be your best way to see how the
The
impact.
differences. Yeah, so because I'm just looking to make sure it's several $1 million each time we do, but okay, so that answers my question. I was just doing the raw aggregate, but that's the other way of doing the math. Okay, that answers my question. I just want to make sure I had the right approximate number, so thank you. But either way, in 2025, 2026, we're going to be below 2.5 fund balance regardless of what we do, assuming no changes to TEA, no new financing, just based on everything we know as of today's snapshot.
That's if we do nothing.
New nothing, right, no changes, just keep
There will
everything
be
as is.
things happen.
Sure. But if we-
That is if you just do nothing other than give a 321 one time and do nothing, that's the end result. No matter what plan we choose, we're going to do something.
Yeah, we're going to have to.
It's, I think I said it the last time, but I'll say it this way. It's how aggressive is that something going to happen?
Right.
And how fast is it going to happen? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And Susie, can you
That's
go?
what it is. It's just how fast am I going to have to start bringing you things to choose between on how to save some money? Because we cannot do this. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Just making sure I had the numbers straight in my head for discussion. Thank you, Madam President. That's all I have as far as
Sure.
questions related to that.
Did you have something, Mr.?
No, I was just going to say, if you wanted to see, we also had a slide where it showed if we gave 321 every year, what it would do to fund balance, but that wasn't the question that was asked.
I was just looking at the current year, then this is the chart I was thinking of, so thank you very much.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
I had one. We've received a few emails from folks that they mentioned the retention supplement and how it doesn't. Can you explain how that works? Because the information we've received from a few folks have talked about how that doesn't factor into their that basically hurts them by getting that retention supplement. That's how I'm interpreting it.
Well,
Maybe I'm interpreting it incorrectly.
Because it doesn't go for TRS.
Sure. The difference, and I'm going to answer this, Ms. Witten, if you're okay with that. Retention supplements don't count towards TRS. It doesn't count towards your retirement. So because it's a one-time, it's not factored in. So in the state of Texas, the way TRS works, it's your high five. All right? So your highest 5 years, they take that, and then they figure out the multiplier is 2.3, I believe, by the years of experience. And then that calculates out how much. When you give a retention supplement, that's money in people's pockets. But it is one-time money. It's not like you're committing that this year, the next year, the year after that, the year after that. That's why what we've done historically is when there's a little bit of money, but you can't continue to give that out year after year after year, we've given it back to employees in a supplement. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I mean,
Ms. Witten, did I say that right? Is there any clarification that I need
I had
to
That's
make?
correct, sir.
I assume that that's what it was, but I want to get clarification because it seemed as if it was not. I mean, it's not
Pay
beneficial in
raises
their
are
retirement, but-
pay raises are the gift that always keeps
Correct.
giving.
Okay.
A retention supplement is we've given you this one-time money with no future commitment due to a variety of whatever forecast we have or current situations that are happening.
So I guess they're saying that it hurts them because it's not making that year the next, right. Anything else? Oh,
In a Pollyanna world, if the legislature stepped up and really funded education to where could give substantial raises, I'm asking, although I'm pretty certain I know the answer, but I want to get it out there for just thought or discussion. If somehow we came into what we truly needed to pay our teachers and staff what they truly deserve, is there a legal way to give them a retroactive that would, I know bonuses are illegal, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm looking at impacting the TRS. So say next session, all of a sudden they realize the value of what our teachers and our transportation and everyone else has been doing these last few years. If they put that value where we need it, is there a way to access it to impact TRS?
So in that scenario, they would have to pass a bill sometime next session, which probably wouldn't happen until May. And so you're wanting us to go backdate for an entire, I don't think so legally we can do that. Not for a full calendar year.
Yeah.
You can't go back and make them whole. I will tell you that.
This is just my frustration.
Sure.
Really coming out.
This will tell you how old I am. When you said if they did all of these, I honestly thought of, I'm Coming Elizabeth, from that old show. But there's no way for us to go back and retroactively make folks whole. See, nobody even laughed because they're all too young in the audience.
I laughed.
But
Hey, I used Pollyanna, that's even older, so there.
But no, there's no way for us to go back and pay somebody for a year's worth of service with future funds.
I would like to remind you that House Bill 3 that passed in 2019, if the ledge comes in and gives us more money by increasing the basic allotment, that bill, that law requires us to spend 30% of the increase on salaries. And so they've already built a mechanism to mandate raises through that whole process. And so if in the upcoming session they increase basic allotment, then unless they change the law, it'll automatically trigger required increases. Just throwing that out there.
Okay.
Not soon enough for me.
Yeah. I think what you said was key because, I'm reading here what you just said in accordance with House Bill 3, 0 to 15 years of experience should get $600.
6 to 15.
Right, yeah.
Oh, I thought you said 0.
I'm sorry. 6 to 15 years of credible experience should get $600.
Yeah, so
annually.
that was one of the other changes House Bill 3 passed in 2019, is that we include that longevity pay. And so that structure is a continued part of our pay structure now because of that bill.
So that'll happen this year too.
Yes.
And then the 16 plus years of experience, $1,200 annually. And,
Right.
and we budgeted.
So if you'll remember, Ms. Williams, when we were provided that money, it was really left up to districts to determine how to spend it. One of those, when we discussed this and listened to folks, we determined, because you could just say everybody gets 600 no matter years. What we tried to do was parcel it out to reward those teachers that did stick around with us longer by giving them 1,200 versus the 600. We could have just said everybody gets 500 and be done, or everybody gets 600 and be done. But we parsed it out in a way to give those teachers that had more years of service more money for it. Make sense?
Yes, and I was, let's see, it's right here. Looking at, so starting salary for teachers and librarians with 0 years, set $55,300. That's what's being proposed.
Yes.
Right? And then new to district teachers and librarians with 25 plus years, set 64,000.
Correct.
And then in between, well, let me ask, is this comparable with what others are doing? Other districts or other studies have verified that?
Unfortunately, not all schools have adopted their compensation plan, but where we're at right now with the ones that have, I do have that comparison that we looked at. So if I just have a moment to pull that out. We are not amongst the highest, but out of the 10 that we pulled, and forgive me, I'm trying to find.
Ms. Williams,
Where I had
if you'll recall last year, I very clearly stated to y'all, we're going to struggle to be the highest paying district just based on many situations. So I'll give you another across the state because I've been watching this very carefully. 2 districts, they are separated literally by a bridge. One gave 11%, one gave 1%. There's the difference. 2 very different scenarios, but that is the kind of disparity that you're seeing in this type of system. Kind of reminds me of when Robin Hood kicked in, that there just became such a disparity. The state had to step in. But look, in the end, and I think this is pretty common knowledge, school finance, the way it is, has never been fixed. We've placed Band-Aids on it years and years and years, and we've never actually, that's why when you said it, I said,
I'm coming, Elizabeth.
I'm coming, Elizabeth.
See, I got it.
Because quite frankly, this has gone on for decades.
Yes.
Decades. I mean, this is not a new problem. It just resurfaces over and over again. Look, there's a district to our north that their starting pay is almost 5,000 less than we are. Correct. They also charge $1,200 more a month for health insurance. Then there are districts around us that pay a little bit more. It's all based on, again, the bucket is that bucket, right? That is why you're seeing, and you had asked us, and we will bring it to you probably in August, a presentation about VATREs, because that's what we're seeing. There's a district that joins us right here that just recently passed a VATRE. That's to our south. There is another one to our north that did it. And that's how they had to go after more money, was go to their taxpayers and say, would you support a VATRE? So I'll give you just some rough numbers. Correct. Where's Susie? Susie, correct me if I'm wrong. A 1 penny in our school district is just about a little north of 7 million, correct?
Yes.
About 7.2.
So that's the thing, is that when we talk pennies in school finance, is that raising or tax increase, let's say it that way, of 1 cent gains us $7 million. But in another school district that could be out to our west, that penny may get them
9, 10, 12, depending on the size.
right, or one.
One. The
One,
smaller the district.
Because remember, it's tax appraisal that's creating it. And in this school district, and I think, I don't know if I mentioned it that night you guys were at the District 10 meeting or not, but, our property home values have just exploded. That's hence the reason that 40% are protesting them. But, the average home price in Northeast in 2019 was $279,000. It's now, based on these current estimates until they all come in, around just north of $330,000. So we can generate a lot of money by that. But we'll discuss more when we get the presentation to you all for a VATRE and really how it works, what does that look like, and all of that. Because Ms. Villar, I heard you too several board meetings ago, our tax base just can't keep doing it. So there's a balance in all of this, right? That's why I think you all were very smart in adopting a district balanced scorecard, so that we're weighing all of them. We're not just focused on one entity, that we got to look at the whole picture, right? So these are those things that are happening right now.
And we all know that school finance, it's so easy to understand it, right? Of course, I'm joking about that. But yeah, we're just trying to find, something, because we do appreciate all of our teachers, all of our staff, all of our drivers. It's just, we're just trying to find something to grasp onto. Inflation is just out the roof. I kind of joked that, but it was, serious. I bought the family meal of chicken at Bush's Chicken, and a gallon of tea. It was $51 for a 15-piece. I'm like, wait a minute. Is this right? So they're like, oh yeah, we had to raise our prices due to high cost of chicken and add a 3% surcharge. It's like, really? So we understand.
And took the prices off the menu.
Yeah, and
So
took
that
the
they could
prices off the menu.
keep raising them.
So I'm assuming that, oh yes, 15 pieces still $29.95, and but I just say that to say that we definitely understand and appreciate everything. Just trying to find ways to somewhat. We know we're not going to keep up with inflation, but just find something. And just know that we're really trying to do the best that we can.
And Ms. Williams, that's why, when we sat around looking at all these plans, it's why we came up with this piece of hitting benchmarks and really taking a look at, we're projecting, we have no idea if we'll hit these. You just don't know anymore. It's so unstable. if those numbers exceed, we can sit here and you all have that authority. We've worked with legal counsel on this exact thing because his point was, Dr. Mike, you're always pushing my thinking. And I said, great, that's what my job is. But he's like, this is very unique, what you're proposing, which this is hit markers and then make things happen. But we can do it. We can absolutely do it. And it's a way that we can take a look at what happens this fall and bring it back to you all, because again, you're going to have to make that decision to say, hey, yeah, you know what? We did hit some pieces. The reason that it says pay increases and or a supplement is because maybe there's not enough in there to give a huge raise, but there's some money in there to put money back in people's pockets. I think you're probably going to want to put it back in their pockets. So we're going to try to give you maximum flexibility as a board to make a decision based on whatever you feel comfortable in doing. Either or.
And I was going to mention that piece, so thank you for that segue. Can I ask a question? So the target date is that October 28th, 2022,
That is
correct?
PEEM snapshot.
Okay.
That is our official enrollment number
Okay.
that the state uses.
So, and it was not having to hit both of those markers. It was either of those markers.
That is correct.
And so then if we hit one of those markers, if we were to do a salary increase, would it be retroactive for the school year? Or
So
no?
it is not called retroactive,
Okay,
but we
sorry.
can make employees whole.
Okay. Okay. So
All
you
right.
use whatever word you need to use.
Well,
but that's
that
the-
is what we need to use. It is, we cannot by law make retroactive pay. However, we can make the employee whole.
Okay, but, so the bottom line, okay, got it. And then if we can't do an increase, we could do some sort of a retention that would.
Correct. So
And when
Mrs.
would that be done?
So again, so what we would do, so let's use 93.5.
Okay.
All right. So just as a reminder, 1% is 4 million, right? 4.2.
Okay.
Dan's going to get me down. So let's say that we're seeing, because remember, what we aim for is 95% attendance rate. All right. Let's say we start out the year and we're seeing that our attendance rate are really returning back to normal, right? So that's going to be huge because every 1%. Now, in October, that's basically the first 9 weeks. So the first 6 weeks, because we're funded based on 6 weeks. Welcome to education. Got all these weeks. But so that's really first 6 weeks, but it's starting to give us a predictor of how probably it's going to work this year, right? The enrollment piece really happens on the 28th of October.
Okay.
I will know definitively whether we are over 58,556 or we're not. And for every child is, pardon me? 6160 and 17 cents. Now, 6160.
Okay.
So we will know at that point definitively with that. The attendance rate, we won't definitively know really for the whole year, but we're going to be able to start feeling pretty good about this looks like we're trending
Okay.
or we're not trending.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Because we even started out this year not at normal attendance rates.
Right. Right.
And again, even with, I think Susie's done a good job of showing kind of the impact on COVID and such. But even when there wasn't, we just never bumped back to that 95% attendance rate. And look, there are counselors, teachers, assistant principals, attendance clerks. I mean, everyone is out there trying to get that up. But that is not just a statewide issue, that is a nationwide issue.
Right.
That is everywhere.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions for anybody?
I have just a little one.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any other, I know that we had discussed maybe opening the borders, and we were going to put that as a line item. When are we going to be looking at that?
You know that meeting that the board was invited to?
Oh, that one?
Go to that meeting.
Oh, I'm going.
Good? Go and listen.
Absolutely.
Go and listen. That is something, as a trustee, I think you need to go to that meeting and hear that out. And then I think that will help you determine whether we want that on a future agenda or not. Because I do want you to know, and again, I can bring that whenever, but I will talk you through some of the unintended consequences of those. Just so that you're fully aware as a board in whatever decision you make, some of those other pieces. Because yes, it could generate more revenue, but there is a downside to it.
I
as
figured
well.
there would be.
There always is.
Always
right?
is.
But again, it's looking, again, using that balance analogy, it's weighing those pros and cons out and figuring out what's the best answer for you all as a board and for this district moving forward.
Another question, do you have any other thoughts and ideas that we could use in lieu of that if that just becomes too unwieldy? Do you have any other ideas?
Yep, the ATRA.
Okay.
Those are your two to generate it.
How do we, well, we can discuss that later, but that actually sounds kind of appealing.
Again, Ms. Villarreal, we're going to bring you a presentation in August. Look, you could want to do it right now. You can't legally. There's a deadline and a timeline that all of this needs to follow, which is why I'm not rushing after you all said, look, we'd like a presentation in the future. That deadline's just going to not happen this year, so it's not something you could do for a calendar year anyway. So I would rather take and come in with you all so you can thoroughly look through it and really have time to think about it before you make a decision. In the meantime, I think we can explore some of these other options, and then you all as a board can think about what makes sense. Maybe it's both, maybe it's neither, I don't know. We can just talk about them.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because if we don't increase enrollment or go through that process, there's no additional money coming our way at this point.
So maybe we go hand out a bunch of flyers to new home developments
and
and apartments and
you-
tell them, bring your kids to any ISD.
You joke, but I think collectively as a community, we can ask, why people are leaving and find out how we can keep them. As people are moving in, you steer them towards the neighborhoods that then feed into our schools. And those are things that everybody, all of us, not just the 7 or 8 of us, but everybody in this room, everybody listening can participate in that. And so it's definitely frustrating. And all the people that have reached out to us, either come to the meetings or emailed us and called us, we have definitely heard you, and we've definitely spent, at least I know I have, I'm sure my colleagues have, countless hours trying to mull over. My 3 years on the board, I don't remember a meeting where we asked staff to go back and show us what the implications are 5 years out. And it's a pretty stark reality. And so I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say to everybody, pay attention to what's happening at the state level as well. And if you believe in public education, make sure the people that you're putting in that position are also supporting public education. And so if don't look for the flashy headlines, don't look for the rhetoric. Find those that are truly putting their name on an item and making sure that it actually happens. So I'm preaching to the choir because everybody in this room I know is already actively doing that. But remind your friends, remind your family, remind your neighbors that I don't want to pass the buck. That's not what we're here to do. But that is definitely one piece of a very complicated puzzle. So.
Well, and the more people that reach out and have that conversation, the better. They're not always going to just listen to us. I mean, did you have something else?
I was just we're going to discuss the options here after we make a motion. Is that correct?
So what I was going to do, because I have no idea what to anticipate, I've got my Robert's Rule of Orders. I have this little. So what I was going to do is I was going to call for a motion. to approve the compensation plan, and then I was going to ask for a second, and then I was going to ask for discussion.
Sounds good. To make sure
So, are we to that point? Or, go ahead.
I have one question. So the proposal says that if we exceed the projected number or the attendance rate, is there a target for exceeding that? Or if we get 58,557, are we good?
No, that's a good question, Ms. Landry. So if we did that, we'd have $6,160. So the point is what we wanted to do is very clearly show you, here are the benchmarks we have to hit. So if we exceed that, so if we brought in, to your point, 58,557, I would say we exceeded it by one student, which generated you $6,160. I don't think that's going to be enough for you to act upon it for a pay increase. Does that make sense? But we had to set a benchmark somewhere to give you, that is the projection that we are expecting for enrollment next year. Then above that, we'll just see how many more, and then we can come back to you and say, here's whatever number we hit, 59,556, that 1,000 extra students generated this much money. Does that help? Does that make sense? The 93.5, we're at 93.6. I don't think that's going to generate much, but again, that 1% generates 4.2. So if it was 94, you've generated $2 million, 2.1. So we're going to give you that equation in there. Does that help?
It does, thank
Okay.
you. And then also, I just wanted to say thank you so much for reevaluating the pay rate for the bus drivers. I think that was very important, and I appreciate that coming back.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the compensation plan for the 2022-2023 school year?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
second.
Okay, do we have discussion?
I'll start off, I guess, if that's okay, Madam President. Obviously, there's a lot of people here, as trustees, our role is that right balance of stewardship, recognizing the hard work of the teachers and the entire staff, and finding that thing. We can't control inflation. There are some things we can't. Our job is to look at the full compensation package as discussed, and what the district staff, they're trying to be good fiscal stewards and providing us this 5-year outlook. My personal opinion, having looked at all of these things, the 332 plan, which would be about, by my math, $3.3 million differential from 2022-23 all the way out over the next 3 years. So we're talking about $1.1 million a year in efficiencies we may need to find as a board if we chose to do that, which by my math is 0.2% of a $560 million budget. But that also would be a 1% retention, so then it would become 443, and then also other possibilities depending on hitting targets. There's a trade-off there with doing that, but that's kind of my perspective, having looked at all of these numbers and kind of going, where's that balance act of fund balance, recognizing the work. We can't go to the high end that we would want, and we don't know what the legislature's going to do. But that would be, I would move to a 332 plan based on some of those things, and then continue with the district scorecard to look at where we can find those efficiencies from the staff, the community, and say where can we, wants and needs, if we can do that. But that's what I think we as a board could consider doing in addition to the 321.
Can I interrupt you for just a minute? Susie, do you mind coming forward and putting that back on there? I apologize. I should have brought my copies from last meeting, and I didn't.
No problem.
One more. Here you go.
Okay, so Mr. Hilliard, you were saying the 322.
The 332, sorry, the
332.
Yes, ma'am. So that would be a difference of about 3.3 million out in 24-25, minus 27.3, minus 23.4. So over that, still keeps it at 2.5 fund balance, which we know there's some things that are going to have to change, but that opportunity to maybe give a little bit more here now, recognize it's a one-time thing and no subsequent years guarantees of anything, obviously. But, and then just start looking, spreading out those, that 3.3 million over the next 3 years to start looking at efficiencies, return on investment as the staff's going through and evaluating, align everything to that district scorecard. I think we have the opportunity there to do that possibly.
Do you mind if I just, Dan, and Susie, I don't know which one. It's not going to be Shiloh. It's going to be one of those two. The 332 to the 321 is a different. There's too many numbers up here, Susie. What is the difference? Because I know the one you're going to see, but then the ESSER goes away and it dumps in. So what is the true expense moving forward, the difference between a 321 and a 332 plan?
It's approximately 3.3 million.
Okay. Perfect.
I'm sorry, I'm calculating things.
It's a lot of numbers, and that's, trying to mold where that right balance is. But while it costs more now, and obviously our job as stewards of the taxpayers and the public dollars is to do that, but also balancing that with the needs to recruit and retain and compensation. That's the one where I felt comfortable. I know we're stretching a little bit, but we need to, in my opinion, stretch here, and then we can start looking. We have 3 years to start finding that $3.3 million differential and start working at it over the next 3 years, assuming people in Austin don't do anything or there's no changes to school financing.
So if I'm looking at this right, the forecast with the 321 would have been 3.4 in fund balance, and now it's going to be 111. Am I looking at that right? Okay, so I guess you're saying we have 3 years to find that. I'm kind of thinking we got to find it now, because we're going to be at basically, to the point where we're going to be putting, I know it's not really zero, but when you're going from 3 mil to 100,000, it feels like.
Correct, but 23, 24, all the numbers are the 20 million plus negative. I'm thinking fund balance.
So you're looking at the months, you're looking at the
3.8 versus
2.5.
3.7 month fund balance. The next year it's 3.3 versus 3.1, 2.7 versus 2. I'm thinking fund balance. We know structurally there's going to be other changes, but this keeps us in line without going rapidly down. The 543, I can't see us doing that in our roles as trustees, but I can see us doing that, and it's about a $3.3 million cost differential if we were to choose to go the 332 versus 321. But yes, next year we're going to be negative in 23, 24, or the year after, because all that 22 million in ESSER, 20 million
comes
goes
back.
away.
May I
So-
ask a question?
Sure.
Right, okay. Mr. Villarreal, would you please refresh my memory? What is the lowest fund balance that we would need to keep our rating?
It's 2.5 months.
2.5.
So doing the 332, we hit that. Well,
That's in
here's the other thing, right, that I think needs to be said is we have no idea what health insurance will do next year, right?
No, ma'am.
And so, it's possible that, or let me rephrase what I want to say. We've been buying down the insurance for them. So based on this plan, if we were to do the 332, then 23, 24, I'm assuming we would pass all that cost on to the employee.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we would not be able to buy that down.
Well, yeah, so what you're seeing up there is those different rates or different raises, but going forward in 23, 24, there's zero raises and then a zero contribution from the district. So that's what those numbers reflect. There's a couple of slides further this way, 2 slides that shows what it would do if we were to continue giving raises and continue giving health insurance. But what you're seeing up there is just one time this year contributing to health insurance.
Well, and I mean, unless we, in my opinion, unless we were to find a way to get revenue, there's no way we could do a raise in 23, 24. I mean, you're saying, because we're going to be 22 mil in the hole, right? Or 25.5.
Yes, ma'am.
That's forecast,
No,
which is not
that's-
budget.
No, that's not budget. We'd have
This
to
is
adopt-
forecast, which
Yeah,
we.
yes, ma'am.
kind of think is like what will be actual.
Right, yes, ma'am.
So I don't even want you to tell me what that number is going to be on a budget, because it's going to be what?
15 million more, right?
15 to 20?
Yeah, it's 39, in 23, 24, it'd be almost 40 million, and in 24, 25, it'd be 55 million.
Just like when you brought that other one with the ongoing cost one, that's 2 slides down, I think that one may answer your question, Mrs. Grona, because then it starts showing the 33, 39, 40 million. Here in a
Yeah, there
second,
it is.
when you include that. And so that may be the expectation management we as a board have to do. If we go for a higher raise now, there may be some trade-offs next year. And, and so, or do we stick with the 321 and the health benefits at total compensation, slightly lower here, but the health sounds like Blue Cross Blue Shield is a very large benefit used by most of the employees that when you look at total compensation factors out when you talk about take-home pay, which is what we discussed previously too. So that's all part of the expectation management conversation of what's your total take-home pay.
Well, I will say that I like the 2 in the last number instead of the 1. So I like the increasing that to 2. I'm a little nervous about the 332. But I mean, Mr. Hilliard and I have been the only ones talking. So who else wants to
maybe
talk?
3, 2.5. I mean, because the second number is the teachers, which is about
the
half of our
biggest,
staff,
yeah.
and so maybe 3, 2.5, 2. I'm open because I know those numbers are going to be in between, but that's just my opinion from my perspective, where we're balancing those costs to the district while recognizing all the hard work that's going on, and there's no perfect answer, and it'll never be enough. I'm
So we
open for other
didn't
people.
see a 2.5.
No,
So
we
tell me
didn't.
what that.
We did. I just made that up to maybe bridge the gap.
Something.
Actually, as I
push
was
it a little
reviewing
bit, but-
everything, that was actually what I was going to ask about tonight, is if we could look at a 3.5, 2.5, 1.5, if we could even bump it even that much. That was what I was going to propose or suggest or ask for a discussion on. My concern too, if I'm understanding this correctly, that we have a potential of an increase in insurance, which I think is not,
You know,
that's not grabbing at straws there, that's going to happen.
right, I mean, this year, it was quite a bit. Next year, they're forecasting maybe 3% med and 7 to 8%
Well,
on
hold on.
pharmacy. Oh,
Do you mean increase to insurance this year?
Well, in the future.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, in the
This,
future.
the-
Yeah.
this plan is a 0 increase. to health
Right, that's, and we know
But
that's not going to happen.
Look,
yeah.
next year it's going to go up.
It's-
I mean,
I
you know,
understand, that's-
rates are going to go up. It's just whether you as a board decide to buy those rates down or not.
And that's my concern, is if we
Correct.
can't buy the rates down, if we don't have the money to do that, then in effect, we're giving a pay decrease. Because we can't
Potentially, yes.
cover that
Right,
difference there.
potentially, yes.
Which we've seen in districts all around us. They give a pay increase that is now eaten
Right.
up by their
And-
insurance
And I think
increase. Yeah.
that's a great point, Ms. Huey, is many districts that have come out with compensation have not discussed total compensation. They have made it a big announcement, and we're going to give this kind of pay raise, but they haven't talked about their health insurance premium yet. And so it's all in how you roll it out. We just do it all together because it's about total compensation. It's not just about this piece, because you could give a 1% increase and then take 2% from the health side. So we like to do it combined, so the employee knows I got either a true pay raise or I got a pay raise, but some of that is going to go back to health insurance. This has no insurance no insurance premium increase.
Any other comments or discussion or, so what I'm hearing is we had a motion and a second for the compensation with a recommendation to do 322. I'm sorry, 332. I'm sorry. I keep saying it wrong. 332.
But the motion is for 321, right?
Well, the
original
motion was to approve the compensation plan. You're right. So
321.
that is 321. And then the discussion was to amend that plan to be a 332. So Robert's Rules of Orders, y'all help me out here.
But we don't
we have
have,
to- we
we
have to
don't
do-
have a motion to amend, right?
I think I
No,
asked-
but I'm saying that was the discussion,
Right.
is to, it was discussing it to be a 3-3-2. So
Talking about the Robert's Rules of Order.
Would
Do
Mr.
you-
Hilliard like to ask
I was going to
Mr.
say,
Bowden?
Mr. Hilliard, do you want to amend the motion?
Well, I made
Or-
the motion.
Oh, you made the
Yeah,
motion.
you made the
So
motion, I
would
did
have
the
to
second.
accept the amendment.
Would you like to accept that amendment?
And I'm looking at this and, there's a chance I may not be here in a couple of years. Right. And depending on the decision made tonight, I may not be here tomorrow. But, I was trying to understand and think through your proposal there. And, I've thought about this as we all have over the last month or two. And, I think for the financial stability and sustainability of this district, unless there is something drastically that changes, I'm in a position where I don't know that I could support anything beyond what's being proposed at this point, not knowing what's going to happen next year, not knowing what's going to happen. Well, none of us know anything that's going to happen, but I do know that we can 100% give what we're proposing, and it keeps this district running and operating. And we're going to have to make those hard decisions, I think, regardless of what decision we make tonight, to tell you the truth. That's my honest opinion.
Agree, decisions are coming.
That $3 million you're talking about, I'm hoping it's only $3 million over the next couple of years. And that sounds worse than I mean it, but that's, I think following this trend over the last couple of years is that it's we're at a point where we can give what we can give, and not everybody's going to be happy about that.
That's true.
And I think my motion at this point would stand as it's been made.
Okay, so for the 3-2-1.
Can I ask a real quick question? Would we have an opportunity, I don't know, mid-year or sometime, to come back and re-look at compensation?
I think that's our October snapshot.
That's correct. That is that language, Miss Williams, in there. That's why those benchmarks are set there, is that in the fall, I would presume November, maybe as late as December, we would bring back into you with a discussion regarding those specific targets and whether there was more revenue generated than we anticipated, and then giving you the option to determine what to do with that revenue.
I know we're ready for the vote, but.
No, we need to keep,
I have,
Talk about it.
so I
We need
have
to
this
talk about it.
grassroots
Yeah.
idea. If we increase enrollment by 2,000 students, and the 8 of us get 250 students each, that's $12.3 million, based on 6160. So
That's what you were doing.
So that's our
front
call
of the
to
charter
action.
schools.
Yeah, and everybody in here can help get 250 more students each. So I'm just saying.
Can I ask a question?
sure.
Absolutely.
On the ESSER funds, does that maximize the remaining balance by paying out that retention? What is it called? The
Right, the retention supplement.
Supplement,
So the
thank you.
question is, could there be more money left?
Yes.
I think is what you're getting to. Yes, because we're constantly revisiting that. And again, this year, there were some positions in there, for instance, some math folks for remediation that we just never could find. And so that was some extra money, which is why this piece, and I will tell you, our hope and what I've charged Dan and Susie is really to look at, we've, in this compensation plan, we're committing to a fall retention supplement, but I've charged them with really trying to find another 1% for the spring as well. So
1% for the fall.
correct, and then one again in the spring. But right now, we know for certain we have found the money needed for that 1% in the fall. We're a little bit short for the spring, but that can change. It just depends. There's a lot of factors that go into that.
But this compensation plan includes the 1%
Correct.
in November.
Correct. It is the 1%. And, you know, and I just want to remind everybody, remember, you as a board voted to give 2 supplements this past year. Some districts gave no supplements whatsoever. But as we started to see some money become available, we brought it to you all pretty early and said, hey, let's do this one-time supplement at Christmas. And then, that's right, y'all weren't on board. So we brought it in the fall, and we said, we actually have some money here. Let's do this supplement now. So we gave it in November, right before Christmas, when people needed to spend money. And then we came back to you all again, I believe, in like February, and said, is that correct, Susie? In February, and said, there's actually now through, looking through it again, we actually bring to you again another 1% supplement for the spring that we gave them in March. So absolutely, I mean, that just all depends, how it all works itself out. But so is there more money in the future? Maybe. In the sense of that we didn't spend it somewhere else. There's no more ESSER money coming. We've got what we got.
In the ESSER fund, there's no risk of us having to give any of that back because
No.
there's still some in the.
Only if we don't spend it. We're going to spend it.
And that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
We're gonna spend it.
We're going to spend it. All right? I can tell you that. We're not giving any of it back, not even a nickel. Which is why Dan, Susie, Mary Alex, and those folks have been working so hard on making certain that it is spent and appropriately. Because, again, it's an accounting nightmare. Would that be safe to say? When it comes to federal dollars and making certain that we're tracking it appropriately because of what Texas did with the first round of ESSER by supplanting their obligation to public education, the Fed said you will 100% be in an audit. So they are going to audit Texas, which means we're going to get audited. And so we're making certain that we have everything done appropriately so that the feds don't come in and say we did something wrong and now we have to give money back. But we recognize that very early on. And in fact, part of our ESSER plan, I believe, we hired someone to track every single dollar so that we don't get into that predicament in 3 years.
Years ago, this similar situation happened, and we called it ARA money back then. That was back in the early 2010s.
2011.
2011. And so at that point in time, when they gave us the money then, the state supplanted a lot of it. But the feds at that point in time said, we're going to audit everything. And so when they started making noise about doing it again, we were like, oh, you're going to audit all that again. So it didn't surprise us at all that it was going to happen because that's what they did historically. And so we totally suspect to see the same thing again.
Madam President, I just had one thought and before we vote, because everyone's ready to vote. But this fall budget amendment, which we're talking about possibly once we see the enrollment snapshot in October, I know as we get the district scorecard up and running, hopefully we'll find some efficiencies there, wants versus needs. But I know previous career in the Air Force, they used to have an IDEA program, and anybody could put in, I don't know if there's already that thing there, but they incentivized folks, gave them a small percentage of the return. I don't know that we have to do that, but they went out to every single person, and one maintenance person found a way to save the $1 million because they were using a 20-year-old process. And I think y'all probably already doing that, but we've got 8,000 employees, and I'm sure there's lots of efficiencies they may know in their own classroom or back shop or whatever. I'm sure y'all probably working on that.
We are working on that 100%.
Okay, because that's a way to find.
Absolutely. Perfect. And we're taking a look at different things and realizing ways, but again, what I've charged all of these guys over here is listen to every idea and let's take a look and see. But again, it's always that the benefit versus the cost, right? And it's like we can say, and I think this goes back, Mr. Hilliard, when we were talking about the balanced scorecard and we talked about efficiency, and I said, if we only focus on efficiency, we may lose effectiveness, right? And that's that piece, is that we're always looking at how we can cut. These guys, Mr. Jarrett's been cutting folks out of his. I think every one of these folks over here have cut folks over time. And again, that's what I'm talking about, is how fast I have to move. It's, do we have some time to really look at effectiveness and efficiency, or is this just about efficiency because we have to get somewhere? Otherwise, because what they didn't include is back in '09 was the fiscal cliff that came with all that money.
Yep.
Is, it got pushed into general fund, which just further exacerbated the issue. And so, yes, we are 100% looking at efficiency.
And
I got 169 pages on my desk
Yeah.
about that efficiency.
well, and I want to say thank you to the entire staff and everybody who's provided comments to us. At the end of the day, we're all supporting these kids' improved academic performance, and that's what we're here for. And so we can't ever lose mind of that. But you need great people and all the right stuff, and there's those balancing acts with constrained budgets. But thanks to everybody who's involved, because it helps all these kids maximize their potential in their life path. So that's what makes me always think, hey, we're trying to get to that at the end of the day. So anyways, that's it. Thanks, Madam President.
Sure. Any other discussion?
I just, as I've listened to this discussion, I think I could have easily come in here this evening and voted for a 555. That would have been just great. And I think I could have maybe felt a little bit of comfort with 332 until I've listened to this discussion. And we not only have that responsibility to our taxpayers, but the 321 means that we're also responsible to our staff. If we endanger their future in the district so far as a raise or insurance, then we're putting an unnecessary or a scary burden on some people that can't afford it right now. But I'd still rather have a 555, that's for sure.
Are you asking to amend the proposal?
No,
Okay.
that was
I won't
just
make
my
light of it, but, I
Pollyanna
mean,
self
if we-
talking again.
If
Just-
we're
yeah.
actually talking, then let's get all the amendments out there now. And I don't mean that, I'm not
No,
meaning that
I know.
sarcastically.
I just, I wanted to say, my point in that was, this has been some very thoughtful discussion, and I really appreciate the fact that everyone is listening not only to staff, but to all of the emails, and like you said, Mr. Breyer, the phone calls, the information we've received from our community. So hopefully everyone will make trips to Austin in the spring, and let's get our voices heard. And that shouldn't be just this 8 or even this room, but it needs to be our community helping us get the word that we've got to take better care of our teachers and our staff.
Did you have
I've
some-
already started.
Oh, me too.
I have. I don't think you need to wait until January.
And if you live in the district, have your friends, neighbors, everyone send their kids to NEISD.
You're going to really work hard to make sure we've each have our own
If I
250.
have to get all 2,000 by myself, I commit to that.
Okay, anything else? All right, so the motion is to, and the second is to approve the compensation plan, and the compensation plan was the 321.
With all the things that were presented in our,
Right, but I mean, that's the bottom line, right? It's in the action. Okay, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, staff. Thank you. I know that we're going to hear from some unhappy people, but, you know, I was at SLI this past weekend and was sitting next to a trustee from another district and was talking about, you know, adopting a deficit budget, very large deficit budget, and he looked at me like I had 3 heads. Because he's coming from a district that has a healthy fund balance, has, you know, have a great budget. And he was like, how can you can't do that. How can you? And I said, you know, anyway.
Right.
So I think we're between a rock and a hard place. I mean, we want to do what we can for our teachers and our staff and our bus drivers and, custodians and cafeteria workers, but it's also our responsibility to not put our district in jeopardy and to not put our staff,
Yeah, and Ms. Grona and Dan, you're going to have to correct me, but we got as low as a district as 1.9, I believe,
It was
right?
1.8.
1.8. And how long did it take us to get up to 3?
12 years, 13 years?
That's what I think gets lost in this. Is it's not like this is just going to happen. It's a very difficult. It's taken, I think, 11 years to get to 3 from 1.8. It's a lot.
So one thing I will add to that, and I think with the discussion, I was kind of holding this comment until afterwards, but I think Dr. Micah mentioned this at the last meeting, that we need to take a hard look at our own district and figure out a strategy with the district scorecard, what we're going to do to get ourselves out of this mess, and what we can do that has happened over the last 20 plus years that has put us in this position to where right now in 2022, I'm having to sit here and make a decision that was not taken lightly by anybody. And so it's looking at efficiencies and cutting where we have to. It's looking at long-term strategies of more students, what was it?
VATRE.
VATRE. And so I think our commitment will need to be that we do that and we hold Dr. Micah accountable to that, because we're responsible to everybody else out there. So anyway, that's all I got.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? If not, item 4, adjournment, and the time is 7:47. Thank you all for being here.